Good morning. Today is the 20th day of Teves. It is the Yortzeit of the Rambam.
Yeah.
The Yortzeit of the Abir Yaakov, the Baba Sali's grandfather. And it's also the 1st of January, 2024, which we, according to Rav Ginsburg, his calculations, this is from the birthday of Rabbi Akiva, as it turns out. Okay. Let's, which is an interesting twist on the whole thing. Okay, we were up to, where were we? We were talking about the holy, and we said that in the infinite light can only dwell in the sphere of Chokhmah, which is why Chokhmah is referred to as Kodesh. Kodesh means something that's significantly different, distinct, separate. And how is it separate? That the Ein Sof, the infinite light of God, can only enclose within wisdom. And it doesn't enclose within the lower Sfirot. When you get to the lower Sfirot, it's already not the infinite light. Rather, it's just, as we'll see, it's a glimmer. It's something much lower and much lessened, and as we'll see, it doesn't even come from the same source. It comes from a different source. Okay. כי מה שאמרו רז"ל, מה הנשמה ממלא את הגוף, כך הקדוש ברוך הוא ממלא את העולם, מבחינה זו שממלא את העולם בבחינת התחקות הערה בגן עדן העליון כך ובתחתון כך, כמו שחיות הנפש בגוף מתחלק בראש יותר וידיים בפחות ורגליים בפחות יותר, זהו באמת רק הערה דהערה לבד מעצמותו יתברך. So he says like this, that the sages say, they have a very important medrash that deals with how to perceive divinity, how to think about divinity. And in this medrash, says, again, this is like one of the most basic things to a person should always hold on to this. Morning. How's your back? Oy vey. It's the cold. It's the cold. Our sage's statement, just as a soul fills the body, so too the Holy Blessed One fills the world. So they liken a certain aspect of godliness to the soul. They say just as a soul is something that encloses itself, it fills, it goes within, as it were. That's the mashal. It's a parable. Obviously, it's not like filling a balloon with air. Yeah. Because there's no balloon. Well, balloon maybe there is the body, but what goes inside is not exactly air. It's not something you can quantify. So still, the parable is to think about it as something that fills something else. So this refers to the dimension of divine light that pervades the worlds and encloses itself within them, meaning that it penetrates the worlds. Divinity, per se, is everything. It's also the world. But here we're talking about what can be perceived. Everything is God. But I can't perceive that. So when we say pervade or penetrate, we mean that there can be some perception of it. There can be some acknowledgement of it. So that which is described here that penetrates or fills the world is like the soul that fills the body. And by the way, by the soul you have also the same thing. Not everything in the soul can be perceived. There are parts of the soul that cannot be perceived. We call them superconscious. Right? So this light, we've talked about this in the previous mitzvah that we talked about, but because it's such a basic staple, it repeats every single time. This is called memale. This is called the light that fills the world. The way the Zohar calls it. Ha'ora memale kol almin. The light that fills all worlds. And again, it's because it can be perceived. So it allots a different level of divine light for every particular rung of existence. So, in the upper Gan Eden, there's a higher level of light. In the lower Gan Eden, another level. And again, we said Gan Eden, paradise, or the Garden of Eden, in its symbol means a inner understanding of divinity. Meaning, in the same way that I can say the words now, but it's not the same thing as if you understand it fully. When you fully understand it, that's the Garden of Eden. Okay? And we can always say that because we're physical beings, there's also always something that's missing from our understanding. There's always some barrier to getting full perception of what we're talking about. Because in the end, we describe it as like air filling a balloon, and that's not very good. That's not an abstract enough image. So we have to have something that's better than that. And the body sort of creates a barrier to understanding that because we try to understand everything in terms of the body. So, we said this when we were learning about Tzitzis. The Rebbe Rashab came up with this simple idea. He doesn't do it here. Here, I don't think Tzemach Tzedek is doing this. He said, for everything that I need to explain, I'm going to give you two parables. One will be like a physical parable, like a parable that the body understands. But the Chiddush, the big breakthrough of Hasidic thought, is that I can use the psyche, I can use the nefesh, in order to give you a parable that is much more abstract, yet still very perceivable. You can still very much understand it. So what would we say? So that's what the sages did. They said, just as God fills the world, so the soul, sorry, they said the other way around. Just as the soul fills the body. What do I mean by the soul fills the body? I don't mean the air that I breathe. I mean the life force that I feel through my body. That life force is what we call the light that fills the body. That's the part of the soul that penetrates, that becomes part of the body, that gives it life, as we'll see. Okay? It's the source of life in me. I feel that. I know what that is. But I also know that it's not something physical. On the other hand, I feel it everywhere. I feel it precipitating through my entire body. I feel it going through everywhere. So in the body, the life energy of the soul is manifest more in the head, less in the hands, and still less in the feet. So this is the mashal that he gives, the parable that he gives. In the body, you feel it. You feel that there's a lot more life, and that's why at some point we stop moving, right? We become, what do you call it, when somebody stops, we become inanimate objects. Because it's easier for us at age 50, 60, 70 to just sit around. But take the child doesn't feel that way. The child feels that the best thing to do is to move around. Why? Because it still has a lot of life force flowing through the entire body. So it's moving it. But as you grow older, the life force recedes. And so you feel most of it in the brain. You feel most of it in the head. And so you're very comfortable just using your head. You're very comfortable just sitting and not moving, and especially if you can't. And I'll just think. I'll just sit here and think. I'll just sit here and rest, as people say. Because you feel the life force in your head. You feel it. You feel that something's going on. Hopefully something's going on, right? If you're not sitting in front of a TV or whatever they call it. In truth, however, the light that shines. Okay, so that was what we call the light that fills all worlds, or the integrated light, the light that goes in. This is just, in truth, however, the light that shines in all of these levels is merely a glimmer. Here he writes a gleam. I don't know if can you say that? A gleam of a ray from his essence. Okay. Why? Because his essence is not perceptible. So it can't be that this has to be some kind of a tzimtzum, some kind of a contraction of his light. Like how? A simple example, if I had to give something from nature. So I would say the light of the sun itself is like God's essence. Why? Because I can't look at it. It's too bright. I can't perceive it. I can only perceive it when I get it indirectly. So how do I get it indirectly? So I get it from the moon, let's say. That I can look at. But by the way, the moon's very bright also. I don't know if you've tried to look at it for a long time. It's not that easy to look at it for a long time. It's also bright. But during the day, I get the sunlight indirectly. I get it from where it bounces off. It goes through a window and bounces off my floor, and it fills the room. It's very nice. But I can't look at the sunlight directly. So that's something completely different than this glimmer, as we call it. Glimmer is how I translate the word ha'ara. Ha'ara is like a glimmer of the light. It's an indirect effect of the light itself. You could have a glimmer of a glimmer also. Ha'ara de ha'ara. For instance, they say that the difference between glimmer and glimmer of a glimmer is when you're outside, and let's say you're under the sun, but you're not looking at it, you're looking at the ground. So everything's very nice, and by the way, if it's snow, you can't look at it. You get blinded just as much. But let's say it's just regular, it's in the middle of summer, and you're looking at the ground. The ground also reflects a lot of light, but you can tolerate that. So you're in the sunlight, you're looking not at the ground, let's say, you're just looking straight ahead, and you can see where you are. It might be very bright, that's why people put on shades, but in the end, you can look. The glimmer of the glimmer is when you're inside a room. So then the sunlight's not even penetrating directly. It's hitting somewhere outside, and then sunlight's coming in. So what you're enjoying in the room is much more useful in that sense than the sunlight that is outside, which is too close already to the essence of the sun. And certainly you couldn't stand the essence of the sun itself. But God's essence, and again, this is the word that I always have trouble with, because it's not essence. Essence is mahut in Hebrew. But everybody translates it as essence. The word here is atzmuto, the etzem of Hashem. The etzem means the thing in and of itself. And I used to even know, so usually in English they say the substance of God, as opposed to essence. But that also is a little bit problematic, because people understand substance as something physical. It also means the substance of the etzem of what is this? The core also is like, it's limiting. I want to say the whole thing. I don't want to say the core. I told you once that in Greek there was a word for it, and I don't know why, but in English it fell away. In German they have it. They have the actual word for it. And in Hebrew we have the word, and in Arabic they have the word. I don't know why English is so lacking in this case. It's very strange. It's not common of English not to have a word for something. But it may be very telling that the English people never thought to adopt this word. So his substance, by contrast, and even his light and his radiance are distinct and removed from all beings. So what are we getting? We're getting only the glimmer of the glimmer. It's very interesting that he didn't do that here. In the translation here, he just says, is merely a gleam of a ray from his essence. So I guess gleam of a ray is supposed to be ha'ara de ha'ara. Okay. But his substance is completely removed. What do we mean by removed? Exalted and elevated above their comprehension. There's no perception of it. We can't have any perception of it. So that is what we call the infinite. Not the infinite light, but the infinite itself. The infinite itself is imperceptible. How does that work? How does the infinite work? So we said that's called the sovev, right? That's called the light that, in the Zohar, it's called the light that encircles all of reality. It has very different qualities than the perceptible aspect of God. In the perceptible aspect of God, we just said that there's a difference between the brain and the extremities. There's a lot more life force in the brain, and there's much less in the extremities. So likewise, when God is giving his glimmer of his presence to beings, so there are beings that are very high and beings that are very low. Some of them are like the brain, and some of them are like the nails. So, an amoeba has no perception whatsoever, but you can't say that nothing at all because it's alive. So there's a little bit of life there. The little bit of life there is very, very simple. But when you take a human being, so it's very high. But when you're talking about the substance of God, there you can't make this distinction. There's no such thing as higher and lower. In relation to this essential level, substantial level, small and great are equal. It doesn't matter whether you're small or great. They're all the same. I have to figure out what it says.
Small and great are equal. In other words, by Hashem, there's no differentiation.
By the substance, by the sovev, there's no differentiation. Everything is the same. You have to look at this in the way we were learning some years ago. So the way it came to me is that when you look at the world, you see life. So you see that a human being is more alive than a table. You see that, you perceive it. But take a picture of the scene that you're in right now, a photograph. And look at the photograph. In the photograph, you don't see that.
You don't see the difference.
You can't see any difference. So that's how you have to perceive that the sovev is looking at reality. As far as the sovev is concerned, it doesn't matter if something here is animate, inanimate, vegetable. It doesn't matter at all. It's just a scene. And it contains various objects, but who cares? They mean nothing. So that's one way of looking at it. So we said also that this is a technique to take yourself out of the center of your universe, because that's the biggest problem that we have, that we are egocentric. So look at your scene through a mirror, and then try to recognize yourself as something special in the mirror.
In the mirror.
Yeah. Are you something special in the mirror? And then you see that you're not. There's another part of the scene. In fact, you may be the worst part of the scene. You don't know. It's the part that doesn't fit. Whatever. But in any case, you're no longer egocentric. So from the Sovev's point of view,
from the what?
Sovev, from the surrounding light's point of view, I am no different than anyone else. We're all the same exactly, and the same as an ant, as the Baal Shem Tov would say, that both I and the ant are creations of God. There's no difference between us, but that's only from the perception of the Sovev, of the substance. And again, even when we say substance, we don't really mean substance. We just mean what we call the substance. Okay? So there, the higher level of light is called Sovev Kol Almin, encompassing or encircling all the worlds. And it can be compared to the radiance of the sun as it is yet included in its source, the orb of the sun itself. So that's what we said before, that you can't perceive at all. Even if you could look at the sun, that's still not the light of the sun as it is in the sun. Because in the sun itself, it's a nuclear fusion reaction. There's no way that anything can ever perceive that. We can only know it indirectly, so we're only living off of the glimmers. We're only living off of the he'ara. Right? So this is all very simple. These are very simple things. We've talked about this. And it's not comparable to the various... That radiance is one simple essence. And is not comparable to the various colors, the hues that can be seen in its ray through the different instruments and windows through which it shines. In a similar way, the light which is called Sovev Kol Almin is called holy. That is distinct. It's completely distinct from what we have. On this basis, we can understand the verse, with you is the source of life. The verse does not say you are the source of life, but rather with you. For God's essence is not the direct source of our vitality, because our vitality, what can be imbued within the body, what can penetrate the body, what can give life in the body, we said that's called the memale, that's called the light that fills. That's not you. When I say you, I'm pointing at you yourself, your substance. So with you is the source of life. So you have the source of life with you, but you're not the source of life itself. Of course he's the source of life, but he's not for my perception, because I can't trace my life back to him. Now this is a very important point. No being can feel that their life comes from God. Anybody who says that is lying. They simply have not thought it through. We cannot perceive what our source of life is. And that's a feature, it's not a bug. And it's a feature because there's what we call life force comes from this glimmer. It doesn't come from the substance itself. Now somebody would say, but what are you talking about? The substance is everything. How can you say that it's not from there? Because again, I said it's not God Himself. It's what we perceive as imperceptible. That's what we call the substance. That's what we call the sovev. What we cannot define, what we cannot grasp, understand in our consciousness, we call that the sovev. We call that the substance of God.
Isn't it just a matter, I'm oversimplifying it. I know I'm not right, but isn't it just a matter of degree of tzimtzum?
So tzimtzum is only shayach. It's only relevant when you're talking about the mamale. You're talking about the light that penetrates. There you can talk about a contraction. That's what we said, that from the brain to the foot, there's a contraction of the amount of light that comes down.
In other words, that light is indirect. Is that what you're saying?
Right. It's indirect. It's indirect.
Indirect, but still connected to Hashem. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
That light has a connection.
Okay.
But what's the connection? The connection is imperceptible. You don't know what it is.
No. All right.
Anybody who says they understand the connection.
I understand. Now I get back to what you're saying. Yeah, it's there, but anyone.
Not only that. Let's take the photograph again. You can't connect the life in the actual image and what's going on in reality to the picture you see in the photograph. You can't find any hint of the life force in the photograph. The photograph doesn't. That's why moving pictures are such an amazing thing, because they fool you into thinking that there's actual life here.
Yeah.
There's really no life. There's no life on the monitor. There's no life, and it's all completely inanimate. So we'll continue tomorrow, and we'll see how this all connects back to sanctifying God.